Good afternoon, folks. And first of all, thanks a lot for actually taking your time to attend this session. I know time is really valuable for you guys, especially a Friday evening, a day before the weekend. Cool. So before we start, let me tell a bit about myself and then I'll get some information about yourself. Okay. So I'm Danny Akash and I'm working in PicureTrail right now as their mobile developer. So my job involves building mobile app, and the space I'm working in is actually travel tech. Travel plus tech. So PicureTrail is a travel based company. So we build customized itineraries and we help people plan vacations. So you guys probably know what kind of work it will be on a non-technical level. But on the technical level, we are solving an interesting solution. The thing is, we are trying to provide on-trip support much accessible to the normal people. You all know basically when you book a trip, you are basically investing a lot of money. It's a big commitment, and you are also going to a different country that's completely new to you. Sometimes you might even not know their language, and you will be in a place filled with strangers. And imagine if something goes wrong at that point. For example, you might find it difficult to find your transfer. You just got out of your plane and you're having difficulties finding your transfer. So at that time, we are actually trying to provide a way for you to easily find the cab driver. You booked a travel, you booked a transfer. We are building an app that automatically suggests you where that person is, gives you their contact numbers, and also lets, if you find it difficult for you to find the cab driver, it makes it easy for our customer support people to know that you are actually having some difficulties. So we find it easier to quickly hop in without you ever having to contact us. And also during the trip, we also have some travel intelligence. So if you are near a theme park, we will suggest you that there's some interesting activity happening inside the theme park. So our focus is bringing delights to your trip. That's basically what the mobile app does. And PicureTrail, you can actually go to picuretrail.com. It's a really interesting site. You can find some of the best vacations you can. We have this section called Hidden Gems, where you'll find all the hidden places which other travel providers wouldn't suggest you. Good place to check out if you're planning any vacations soon. So that aside, PicureTrail aside. And I actually am a science geek. So I do a lot of science related stuff. And yeah, I also planning a science event at next ThoughtWorks Geek Night. You might want to follow me on Twitter. You will know all my updates. And I also do a lot of memes. If anyone's, obviously no one's gonna hate memes. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter, you will find all the funny stuff I post. So going back to the event. So today's event is having a title called Building Universal Apps with Expo. So how many people here are developers? Okay, we have quite a few hands. I hope you are a developer. Let's hope you are a developer. Cool. So how many people here are non-tech who have no idea what this event is all about? Yes, we have one hand. I'm really happy that person is here. So you will get to know. So our goal is planning to build an app that virtually runs everywhere. You all know that you probably will be using a lot of apps in your day-to-day life, right? You will be using Facebook, Instagram. They are all Android apps and iOS apps. And people from corporate backgrounds, you will have some native applications like Jira, Tally, right? And you also have web apps, Amazon, Flipkart, where you go online in your browser and you try working with these applications. So these applications, you will find something in common between them. The thing is, all of them have the same purpose. For example, if you look at Flipkart, the purpose is building an app that sells products, right? And the app actually has 3 different platforms. It's having a web app, it's having an Android app, it's having an iOS app. For a company on the scale of Flipkart or Amazon, maintaining the 3 different platforms is no big deal. Obviously, they have enough developers. And how many developers do you guys usually work with? Let's say, how many developers are there in your team?
7 to 8.
7 to 8. And how many platforms do you cater to?
2 platforms.
Web and Android. You guys haven't done iOS yet. So that's the issue that I'm actually trying to address here. So his team actually caters to web and Android platforms, but they completely left out the iOS platform. So Let's go with the next slide. So this event uses a specific technology for programming called React. And it's quite famous right now. Obviously, many people have started working on React here at Chennai. And there is a buzzing community starting around India. You can go and see all the developers are slowly migrating their existing projects out to React. So I'm setting the expectations right. We will be using a lot of React in this. Followed by that, this is a summary of what we are going to learn. And the first thing that we obviously going to learn is what exactly are these platforms. Right? Platforms is one. Second, we'll see how the modern app development is working. How people are currently building apps and what kind of needs they will have, and why build a native app and why you shouldn't build a native app. Obviously, there are two things we will be looking, and cross-platform development tools. There are lots of tools available right now if you want to build an application that runs on both Android and iOS. Great. Then a bit of JavaScript. Obviously, you all know JavaScript right now. It's taking over the world at an alarming rate. Like, we used to have like so many languages for building applications. Right now, everyone just learns JavaScript and they just goes around building everything they want. And we'll learn React Native, Expo, and a bit of coding. Obviously, we are going to do a bit of coding where I'll show you guys how to build an app in less than 15 to 20 minutes. An entire app. I'll also ensure you guys can run that directly on your Android phones. Cool. Let's start with the initial stuff. Platforms. Yeah, you can read. So, what comes to your mind when you say platform? Yes?
There are many kind of platforms for various things.
Various of things. Platforms are basically the things that provide you to do additional stuff. Right? In technology time, a platform is a group of technology based on which other applications are developed. Right? So yeah, I put up some really easy to understand platforms here. Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo. So they are all like gaming platforms. Let's also look at some non-technical related platforms. Say you are a small business owner. Say, what's your name, bro?
Maris.
Pardon?
Maris.
Maris. So Maris is actually a flower shop owner. Right? So Maris actually sells flowers. And over a period of time, he thinks, okay, I've been selling flowers a lot. I'm really good at my business. Now let me expand. Let me ship the flowers all over to the country. So what Maris does is, he's really good at one thing, selling flowers. But he actually wants to expand his business, so he's looking for a platform. And an ideal platform, what will it be for Maris to expand? Online. Online in the sense, what he should do? He can host a website. Or let me tell you an easier platform. He can register as a seller in Amazon. Right? So the advantage of registering as a seller in Amazon is they have the infrastructure to deliver his flowers. He don't really have to spend so much time on building a delivery partner and building some warehouse and all the things. He can scale by piggybacking on the Amazon's infrastructure. So now Amazon provides a nice platform for him to sell goods. That's how exactly a platform works in technology terms. Now let's take the same example and apply it to a technical platform, say Android. Now I am actually have a nice idea of an application that lets people nearby find people who are having similar interests. So what I should do is, I need to get this idea out and make it easily accessible to the people. So that's my goal. I have an idea, I want all the people to use it. So what each people will carry is, they'll have a phone. Obviously an Android phone or an iPhone. So if I make an app that can run on those phones, I can have that idea out in the market. Anyone can download it, install it, and start using it. That's how a platform actually helps cater to my idea. Now here the thing is, we have ideas and we have products, but the thing that we generally don't have is the infrastructure or the necessary people to work on that product, right? So right now the platforms are split. There is a huge split happening right now. We have like web, where almost everyone, while they are working or while they are on a weekend, they are surfing, they prefer to use computers when they are home. a big screen. They can actually go and see a lot of information, book. And whenever they are mobile, when they are moving, when they are traveling, they tend to use their phones. And phones are also split. Like there are two platforms, Android and iOS, and two user bases. And there are obviously other phones, but as a business, we all tend to find the most used platforms. So we tend to go with Android and iOS as our major target. So now, I forgot your name, sorry. Maris. So Maris is selling his business. He's selling some great flowers with his business. His business has really grown, and now what he finds is he thinks he can actually manage the deliveries and the infrastructure himself. Instead of going with Amazon, he decides to scale on his own. So now comes the part where he actually have to reach his customers, right? Obviously now he has like platforms to catch. Right now he realizes that people who buys flowers often are split between Android and iOS users. So what he needs to do is he needs to build an app that can run on both these platforms. Now this is a targeted platform side. So these are the targeted platforms that are currently available. So he will be having an web. Obviously almost all businesses have websites right now thanks to the internetization of all the small businesses. And there are, on the right side you can see there are three platforms called Android, iOS and mobile web. You need to pay attention to the tab mobile web because web actually is split between two different screen sizes. You have a landscape mode desktop computer and you have a portrait shape mobile phone screens. So people who build web apps, applications that run on the web, often end up building two different web apps, two different things. So just by having a web app and a mobile app, you have like 4 platforms you actually have to support. You get like an Android app, an iOS app, a web app and a mobile web app, making things even more difficult for our Masha. He just wants to sell flowers, but he actually has to write code in 4 different places. And here's the interesting part. Every time he introduces a new feature or decides to change an existing feature, what happens is he has to make the changes in 4 places, right? Currently, as I heard from Masha, he said he's working with a tech team with 7 to 8 people. But with 7 to 8 people, they are having difficulties managing 2 platforms, web and Android. They are having their hands full enough, they can't switch into iOS. Now, this is actually limiting all the small teams. Big companies, enterprises, they have all the resources they want. Obviously, they can go for native, they can target all the individual platforms and they can address to each of their users. Now, let's see what's actually happening behind these platforms before we see how to do a cross-platform jump between these platforms. The Android platform. Yeah, obviously Android is an operating system where we install apps from Play Store. The first thing is apps are built with 3 different languages depending on the need. Java is usually the most used language. People tend to build, all the experienced Java developers, they tend to start their app with Java. And Kotlin was recently introduced as an alternative to Java, making app development much more simpler. And C++ is used by game engines like Unity or Unreal Engine to actually render their games directly on the app. And these 3 are first-class languages. And second comes the UI part. So the languages themselves are used to execute logic. They are like the platform part which executes your code. And then we have the UI part, basically the part where people see the app. And the UI part are built with XML. Yes, I'll come to Flutter real soon. Flutter is an excellent tool you can choose. So we have XML for UI layouts. And the final app is packaged as an APK file. APKs and .aab, that's a new format, Android app bundles. So we have like 2 packages and finally they are all distributed through Play Store. So while building an app for Android, these are the 3 parts. We have to write code in Java, we have to build UI in XML, and we have to package them as APKs and AABs. Then let's take a look at the iOS platform. Here things actually take a huge turn because the apps are built with a completely different language called Objective-C or Swift. Objective-C is like C and C++, except Apple has customized it to address their needs, their APIs. So Objective-C and Swift are completely different from Java, Kotlin and other language we checked with Android, right? And this UI is built with a tool called User Interface Builder. That's completely different from XML. It's nowhere near XML. And there is a modern tool introduced called Swift UI. People who work with Swift nowadays will know that there is actually an easy drag and drop builder that lets you build UIs at really good speed. And they also have a lot of interactions, animations built into that tool. So we got Swift UI, and the final app is packaged as .ipa. And the thing about iOS is the platform is so locked down, you won't be able to distribute your app without the help of App Store. In Android, you can install an APK. Obviously, many people would have done it. In iOS, it's impossible. You have to go through the App Store. So this is the life cycle you have to follow when you are building an iOS app. Now, finally, let's look at the web platform. You guys would already know. Obviously, everyone would have known about web. The thing is, they are the websites we just go and visit. And they are built with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And again, web also uses a completely different approach. So they use Flexbox and CSS grids from CSS for doing layouts, responsive layouts, obviously. Then the final app is packaged as HTML, CSS and JavaScript, right? And distribution, it can be distributed as any normal website. You just host it on a server, you send it out. Cool. Now, did you people find anything common between all these three platforms? Anything common? They all follow these three same steps. So the thing is, they have a place where they can write application logic, a programming language. They have a place where they design layouts. And they have a place where they can be distributed. Right? And all of them have that same language, an abstraction that's different between each of these platforms. Before we go, abstraction between different platforms. So people are trying to find a common ground between these three platforms. Like, you just have to write logic in one specific language that can easily be put into all of these platforms. Right? So they were searching for a common ground, and they came across some interesting tools. 3 different tools in specific. So the first thing is Ionic. Ionic is evolved from Cordova. So the goal is, there are 3 platforms, 3 different languages, but all of them have one thing in common. All of them can display websites. Obviously, right, in Android you can go and browse your web app. In iOS you can also go and browse. So internet is accessible through all 3 platforms. So what they decided was, they will take web as their major platform. You build your app in a web, HTML and CSS, and you put that code inside Android and iOS through an interface called WebView. So you just build a website, and that website actually runs in Android and iOS. And this works really well. Trust me, because HTML and JavaScript are really good combination for making UI. And there are a lot of apps that currently use Ionic. But there is one small issue with this Ionic. The thing is, the application is basically a website, which means it cannot do any kind of heavy lifting. You know, right? There are apps that do AR. There are apps that do 3D animations, facial recognition. There are so many interesting things going on in the application development space. Ionic apps come with that limitation because they are running inside some web browser inside the app, putting heavy limitation on the developer part. It's good for people who want to start, but difficult for people who are trying to scale into even complex stuff. Then we have Flutter. Flutter is a realm of its own. So Flutter, what they did was, they built an engine. They built their own UI engine. So how it works is, this UI engine acts as a canvas for you to actually build everything inside it. And behind the scenes, that UI engine communicates with the rest of the platform to display that UI. So you may think of it as game development. So you have Unity. How Unity works is you design your game inside a Unity development tool. And once you finished designing and animating that game, Unity creates its own engine, a game engine, and that game engine talks to Android. Your code doesn't directly talk to Android. And it acts as a canvas above the actual Android, XML or whatever layout it is, or table layout in Swift. It appears on top of that layout, projecting your screens instead of the actual layout. So Flutter is a really good choice if you want to go with Android and iOS as your major platforms, because they already ported their engines to support Android and iOS. Now they are working on porting it to web slowly, and obviously steadily they are moving. But the one thing people find difficult with Flutter, just one small difficulty, is it's running in Dart, a language that is not widely used yet. It's running in Dart, and learning Dart as a beginner proves to be a little difficult, because people are used to languages like JavaScript, Python and all. They find it little difficult to enter into this realm where you build apps. Then finally we have React Native. It's been here longer than Flutter, and recently they are actually moving into an interesting scope. So the goal of React Native is React Native acts as a mediator between your logic and the platform. That thing is what we call a native bridge. So think of it like this. I am the guy who knows Tamil. Okay, and there is a guy who is supposed to speak English. Now I need to convey my meaning to that guy who only knows English. So what I'll try to do is I'll find a translator. A translator will come. Whenever I say something in Tamil, he will receive that and translate it to the guy who knows English. Right? And that guy, whenever he says something, he'll translate it back to me. So the native bridge acts as that layer, an abstraction layer where it will convert all our logic and makes it into an API that is understandable by the native part, which means the app that we build with React Native actually is a native app, because the screen, the users see the final product, it will be no different from an app that is actually built with Java or Swift. And they have done a really good job in porting this, that they actually started expanding to more platforms. The Facebook initially targeted only iOS. When React Native was launched back in 2015, the only targeted platform was iOS. Until there was an engineer in Facebook who, for fun, decided to port the same API for Android. Doing so, he realized that it's really simple, because React Native makes no assumptions of the platform it's catering to. It makes simple things like views and text. It takes views, it takes text and renders it in whatever platform we need. So I built it for Android, and now people actually started expanding the platform. So this is what a React Native component will look like. So first we'll have this tag called text. How many people here know a bit of HTML? Almost everyone knows a bit of HTML. So in HTML we have this p tag, span tag, right? The tags that are used to display text. And each tag has its own style. When you do a p tag, it formats it in a paragraph like way. And you do a span tag, it formats into small text. But React Native makes no assumption of what kind of text it is. It simply says, when you put text, it will display text. You can later customize it into whatever style you want. Cool. And when text is done, in Android, the text is being rendered using the Android native XML component called TextView. On iOS, it's rendering using iOS native component called UI label, which means you only write one text, and that text automatically changes into the respective platform specific code. And you get a lot of benefits out of it, because your code only lies in one place, and you can literally do all kind of heavy lifting the native apps do. Let's take a step forward and see all the other components. So we have text, we have views, and we have scroll views, and these three are like the primitive types. Extending this, you can do whatever you want on any platform, because these are all basic things. You have to render text, and you have to render the text on a view. That's it. Now, here are some people who are doing some really interesting things with React Native. So, you all have used Twitter, right? So, when you are browsing Twitter on mobile, they have a progressive web app. A progressive web app is like a website, but it behaves more like an app. So, the entire Twitter web app was built with React Native, but it's not targeted at Android or iOS. What happened was there was a guy called Nicholas who actually ported React Native's components into supporting the web APIs. So, over a period of time, Twitter decided to build their entire mobile app through web APIs, and the app came out really well. Trust me, Twitter PWA is one of my most favorite PWAs out there, and it doesn't even feel like it's running in a web page. It feels so native to the platform. Then we have a platform called React Native Windows. So obviously people will be using Windows. How many of you guys heard about this Universal Windows platform? So Universal Windows platform was launched as part of an Windows 10 update by Microsoft. So their goal is, Windows currently runs in multiple devices. So we have laptops, tablets, Xbox. All of these platforms are basically using Windows underneath their skin. So what they decided was, instead of having to build separate apps for each of these things, we can make an universal platform where you just build one app and it runs on all the places where Windows runs. And guess what? The idea was so similar to actual React Native. So what they did was, Facebook had this Android and iOS code bases. They decided to fork that thing and make a platform that works in Windows. So same text, views and scroll views, three things. You write some code in them and they actually run in Android, iOS, web and now on Windows. And by running on Windows, it means it works in entire universal Windows platform. Right? And people started taking note of that, and people started creating forks of their own operating system choice. So there was this guy who actually decided to try forking React Native to almost all the available platforms, just as a proof of concept to see how it works. And the project is called Renative, and literally the interesting part is the platforms it chose, right? We have iOS, tvOS, Android TV, Android Web, LG, Tizen, Firefox OS, Watch, Windows, Mac, Firefox TV. Literally these are all various different platforms, and we managed to build a native bridge for all of these platforms, which means you actually have to build theoretically one code and it can virtually run in almost all the places possible. This project is called Renative and it's in GitHub and it's undergoing some development and all. Obviously, this is a new approach. People are trying to make one app that can cater all the platforms. Renative is good, but I'd say it's not that stable yet to go on a production level. Probably in future you can start using Renative, because when I tried working with Renative, it has a lot of issues starting the app itself. And there are a few difficulties when you are actually working with React Native now. So the thing is, you understand that theoretically React Native can be extended to any platform. You just have to rely on those three things, text, view and scroll views, and you can extend the app to cater all the platforms. But to do that, you actually have to do a lot of setup initially on your system, because Android and iOS, they have their own development workflows. iOS apps are built with tools like Xcode, iOS Simulator, and Android tools are built with Android Studio and Genymotion, some Android device simulators. And web, obviously you have Webpack, Babel, all the other configuration things. And if you go into Windows, they have Visual Studio IDEs. So there are a lot of development things you have to set up initially on your system, and it will be really difficult for a new developer to actually step into that platform. Yes, so like we were talking, we had some small issues with React Native. So one of the things is platform specific components, Xcode, Android Studio and other things. And we also had to go and find inbuilt modules that are missing with the React Native package. So they are actually no big deal for regular developers. Obviously, developers, we are used to going and finding exciting stuff. But people who are new to the platform, they find it really difficult to get up and running with these kind of things. And the most biggest blocker I find for people, especially students in India, is they need a Mac to develop iOS apps. Without a Mac, they actually have no way to build any iOS related app. And that applies to React Native projects also. Because they actually have to rent a Mac machine on a cloud and they have to run that code on the cloud. I have seen people who attempted it and they're saying the experience is really bad because you have to debug a lot of things on the fly. So having a Mac, that's a big blocker. And this is actually a survey conducted by a independent organization. It's called the State of JS Survey. So in that, they did a survey of the native platforms that people are using. Okay, so they did, initially in 2016, there were like 3 things: React Native, the actual native apps, and the apps that are built by Cordova. Cordova was a result of Adobe's PhoneGap project. And you can see the interest slightly changed over a period of time because in 2017, a platform called Electron came into play. So Electron is not targeted at mobile phones, it's targeted at desktops. So if you have a website, it ensures that website can run directly in desktop. So as soon as Electron was launched, people started moving all their apps to Electron. For example, Slack is a big user of Electron. You know, right? Slack's desktop client is no difference from that web app because they package that entire website into Electron and making it easily a top alternative for quickly doing native stuff on the desktop. But still, React Native had the huge interest. Till 2019, you can see 82% of people really liked using React Native. But on 2019, there is actually a new player that stepped foot into this React development. On the 4th place, you can see Expo, which has like 74% interest. So Expo was there since I started working with React Native. When I started back in 2017, Expo was there. People were just getting started, the Expo team. It was a small team. Their goal is making React Native more accessible. Like I said, there is a huge split happening between all these platforms. People are building whatever they like, web, Windows, and things like that. What Expo wanted was, they saw huge potential. They say, React Native has so many features. So why don't I go and do all the hard work? So what Expo did was, the team, they went and built a client called Expo Client. Expo Client is basically an app that can run on Android, iOS, Windows, or whatever platform they decide to support. And that Expo Client can run your React Native code. So the goal is, you have to go and do a lot of hard labor trying to get your app working in all these platforms. So they decided, let's take all the hard work on the Expo team. We build a client. You just focus on writing code. You know, right? You just have to write code and you just want to see the code being executed in your app. So instead of going out and installing all the Xcode, Android Studio, or all these stuffs, you just have to install an app from Play Store. And recently, they added React Native web support into Expo. And the result is an excellent platform was born, and that platform is called Snack. And how many people here used JS Fiddle? JS Fiddle, CodePen. They are all interesting web-based applications where you can directly build applications on the web. Right? You just open a website, codepen.io, write some HTML and CSS, it immediately shows you the web page. Because it's running in the web platform. Now, Expo did the same approach, but for native apps. What it was, they built a site, just go and scribble some code in that site, it immediately builds an app from that code. And the best part is, you don't have to worry about any kind of complexities. You don't have to worry about Android Studio, you don't have to worry about Xcode, you don't have to worry about camera module. because they built the camera module into that app, Expo app. So you just have to control that module using your code. Right? Thinking back, this makes native app development easier than HTML development. They took a concept, they applied it really well. Now we have an interesting site called snack.expo.io. So this is a snack, they call it a snack. You just have this project on the left side which has files, JS files, React components, images. So this is an icon, just an image. And you put together all of these things. On the right side, you will have the real live application. Cool. First, they have the web. This is the application that's running in real time. They have the web and they have this Android tab where you can tap to play and it will open a real Android device on a remote cloud server. And the fun part is, this is a real Android app, which means your code is actually running inside an Android app. No emulators installed. Right? They took care of all the heavy lifting. I can actually go into this app and browse, use it like an actual app. You can see this is an actual Android app. I can go in Chrome, I can open Google Maps, and this is my actual code. I can just hop in and change the code. Let me type hello world and it updates in real time. So text actually changed to hello world. This makes development accessible to almost all the people, even folks who have no idea of programming. And that's what we are actually going to do. We are going to write our code directly here and see it immediately get built into a mobile app. Great. Let's do a start. Obviously, it's tradition that we always start with a to-do app, right? Whenever we go and explore a new platform. This is built using Expo, and Expo is nothing but an organized version of React Native that can extend to any platform. And let's make it even more interesting. Instead of running it in Android, let's run it in real device. So I have a QR code here. Everyone can actually go and install Expo client on their Android phones. Quickly download Expo app. Search for Expo in Play Store, you'll find that app. Once you are in, scan this QR code. For starters, let's clean up the board. So this is my web part where I have a clean slate. I'll just erase all the existing code. I'll return it to null. And yes, I'll also erase this section, this set of code, and delete this file. Now we have like a clean slate. And is the text visible to everyone? Hope the text is visible to everyone. No, actually you can come front, because if I zoom in anymore, it's gonna affect the actual simulator. Just take a step forward for this exclusive coding part. I'll also make this even more easier. This is actually targeted at audience who are not even familiar with JavaScript or React. So I'm just gonna skip all the important topics and just explain you how the current code is actually working. So my goal is, this is my plain canvas. I'm going to start with displaying some empty text. So what I'll do is, I'll start with importing the text component. So there is, on the top there is an import section where they have imported React. So React is a library that makes the UI possible. So they have built all the classes and components that can convert your JSX like syntax here to actual UI. So React should be always the first import statement. Then we have the React Native part. I'll import some components from React Native. So the first component I'll take is the text. Then I'll remove this code and I'll create an app function. So this is how you write a function in JavaScript in general. It's has the syntax app, the function's name, and arrow based function. It should be familiar with people who have done basic coding in any language, and it returns some value, and that return value is going to contain the text which I just imported. So I'll make it as text. Let me say hello, and I'll export it as a default module, export default app, so that Expo can read this app component and render it on the side. So we have that text here. We got a nice little text called hello. Now they took some inspiration from CSS Flexbox and decided to make layouts that completely depend on Flex. So the concept of Flex is you make the UI expand to the device screen and align content inside that UI. So obviously any kind of app, it usually has like headers and footers. So let me start with having a simple header. So right now we only have text. I'll add another additional item. I'll add a view. Great. Then in the return statement, it's gonna go multiple lines. So I'll wrap all of them inside a bracket. Done. Let me add 3 views. So this view is going to be my header, this is going to be the body, and this is going to be the footer. And at the end, wrap all of these views inside one primary view. You can start seeing a pattern here. This is similar to how HTML works, except instead of div and other complicated tags, I am just using views and text. So on the top I have a view. I'll call it header / view and I'll name it header. And in bottom I'll add one footer. Oh, I forgot. It needs to go inside a text component, otherwise it won't render the text. I'll name it footer. Now I have 3 things: header, hello, and footer. Now to make it actually work like headers and footers, I need to apply some styles. And to apply styles, there is another component from React Native I'll need to import. That thing is called style sheet. I'll import that style sheet and write styles separately. I'll do const styles style sheet dot create. Done. And I'll give it a unique name, app container, which means I'm going to define the styles inside the property called app container inside my style definition. This is similar to how you reference the styles using classes and things in HTML. I'm just directly writing them inside JavaScript as objects. So inside app container, the first obvious thing I'll do is I'll set flex to 1. Since it's based on Flexbox, when I do flex 1, it instructs that container to take up all the available space. So once I set flex to 1 and I set a background color here, background color to yellow, it immediately turns the entire screen yellow. Right? Now I got the entire space for myself. Now I need to start assigning values to headers and footers. So the idea behind Flexbox is, since flex 1 makes the entire container take up the entire space, I'll create a style for my body, styles.body. And let me reference that body here. Yes, and I'll set flex to 1 for this body part. And yeah, I'll also change the background color to green. So now what happens is we have the much needed headers, footers, and the body part, because I have instructed my body part to take up all the available space. But headers and footers, they occupy some space, which means they will be pushed to top and bottom. This is much easier than trying to stick headers and footers inside HTMLs. Right? People who work with HTML and CSS know how difficult it is to make a header and footer sticky inside some code. Great, we got our headers and footers, the layout that we actually wanted. Let me get some code. So my goal is actually trying to build actual to-do list app that can be used as a to-do. So I'll start with creating some components outside. So this is the app's body, let it be there. I'll start with creating some components. So the first component that I'm going to do is header. And inside header, I'll take the boilerplate code out. So the import statements I need are React, Vue and text, everything that we did with app. And I'll also have the content. And finally, I'll export this out. Export default header. So what I have done here is, just like how I did for my entire app, I created the header part alone. And this header part contains only one text, my to-do app. And it has a wrapper, header wrapper. I'll add the style reference here. And it also has header text. Has everyone got the Expo app? Does anyone want to scan the QR?
Yeah, I want to scan the QR.
Yes. So on Android, I'll open it up. Yes, the QR is here. Just do a quick scan. Scanned. Cool. Now you can actually see the changes happening in your phone in real time. Done. So it will show a lot of errors because I'm typing in real time. Don't mind that. Let me go back to web. Yes, there are a lot of device connected messages I can see. Header wrappers here. Now I'll import the header component into my app.js. So importing is simple. I just have to reference header on the top from the directory, which is from current directory. I need to go into my components directory, and then I'll have to choose header.js. That will have my header component. And instead of view, text and all this stuff, I just have to say render this header component here. So right now it says my to-do app. So instead of writing this piece of code inside the app component directly, what I did was I took the code outside. So I'll have a separate component here that contains the view and text, and I can style them separately, right? And inside my header wrapper, I can start writing my styles. So I'll start with setting a background color for this header. The background color is going to be silver. Yes, why not? And I'll add some padding. Yes, the padding is done. Now it starts to look like an actual header. Now header is always center aligned, right? This is where Flexbox actually shines, because you can easily center an element inside a Flexbox just by giving two things: align items and set it to center. So what it will do is, it will center my content on the x-axis. On the x-axis, it centers the content. Then I just have to do justify content center, and it centers the item on the y-axis. It's already centered by default because it's the only content. Now on both x and y axis, I have a content that's centered. Then I can go ahead and add some header text, text style. So I'll just make the font weight. Okay, my bad. I'll set the font weight to bold. So on the right side, you can see I have a bold font. Finally, let's go back, and I already prepared some components for footer. Except on the footer, we are going to add some dynamic values. So I'll create a new file and I'll call it footer.js, and I'll add the values in. So here you can see the function actually takes in some arguments. Total, completed, pending. So these arguments are basically part of the text. Inside text, instead of rendering the string directly, I'm using ES6 template literals, which is a way I can manipulate the string, and I am changing the values dynamically. Total, I am setting a variable called total, completed, and pending. Now, the usage of this component is straightforward. I just have to import it like header. So just like header, I can go ahead and import this footer component. And I'll just have to render the footer here. And on the right side, I can see it is rendering the footer, but with three things: undefined, undefined, undefined. Because I set dynamic values for all the three cases, except I haven't passed the values. So passing them as easy as passing them as JSX attributes, similar to how HTML works. I just have to say completed equals 10, pending equals 5, and total 15. Now since I passed the numbers here, it automatically fetched the value here, because in that function I actually took them as dynamic values. So it's simply following any kind of normal JavaScript functions pattern and rendering the values out. Now my goal is actually getting a to-do component here that can actually render the to-do for the users. And this is where things get a little complicated, because my to-do component is going to have some logic. So this is my to-do component. Let me create a file, todo.js, and this is the entire component. So what's happening here is I have imported a new component called checkbox. So checkbox is similar to view, except it renders a small square box, and it has this attribute called value. This value can be changed to true or false. It will automatically make sure a check is rendered on the text box depending on the style. And I have a function here called toggle status. So what this function does is it takes care of changing the value. Okay, so my goal is changing the value whenever user tries to do some work with the checkbox. Now let me go back to my app component and I'll import this to-do component inside this body part. I'll obviously set is completed to false at the beginning, and task name I'll just set a trivial task. Let's see, and let me just quit that. Yes, great, it has started up the iOS simulator. Open up that project. Great. As I said, this is an Instagram clone that actually looks like Instagram. Obviously not all the functions are done, it just looks like an Instagram. Then the interesting part is this is built in Expo, which means technically I can expand it to other platforms. So what I did was I already enabled web support. So from the terminal I just have to click W and it will attempt to open my project in a web browser. So yeah, it has opened a new tab here, and you can see this is the same application that's running inside web. So I'll change it to responsive mode. Change it to iPhone. Yes. And reduce the size a bit. Yeah. You can see this is a web and mobile web. You saw the app running in web. Now the app is running in mobile web. You can see there is no difference between the actual app and the mobile web version of that app. It's responsive by default because we are using a Flexbox, which is a design that's built for responsive layouts. Like you see, it makes the entire process way more easier. So instead of going out and taking the time to build and maintain 4 different platforms, you just have to build one platform and just have to focus on your features, your business. Like our, forgot your name again. Marish, yes. So Marish, coming back to Marish flower business. Now Marish can hire one JavaScript developer, right? Who knows how to write basic JavaScript code, and he can actually target Expo as their platform, which means Expo is in future expanding into Mac, Windows, and Linux. All the available platforms are under their roadmap. They are planning to build some exciting stuff, and there's also a talk on YouTube where an employee from Expo, actually Ivan, his name is Ivan, he is doing a Expo product work. He explains how they are expanding the platforms to Windows, Linux, and other available platforms. So we got a nice app, and this app is already available on GitHub. So I built only first screen. Obviously, there are room for improvement. You can actually pick that up and you can see the code. You can also start extending on the existing features. So yes, before we wrap up, I'm open for some questions. Actually, the guy had a lot of questions, so yes, it is running. So one of the questions he had was, what about performance? Obviously, you must be wondering, there are multiple layers of abstraction going on. So what happens to the performance? So the thing is, modern mobile apps come with this concept called threads. Obviously, it's an octa-core mobile which can run up to 4 or 7 different threads. So taking the thread count into account, what happens is the JavaScript code runs in a separate thread. The entire JavaScript code, it's completely running in an individual thread, which means the native UI components and all the other things we build, they have their own thread to run, making it much more easier for the native platform to manage both layers. So the only place where you have to worry about performance bottleneck is the React Native bridge, the communication part where the control goes from JavaScript to native. But keeping the communication between native bridge as minimal as possible, we can achieve full native performance. There are libraries like React Native Reanimated and React Native Gesture Handler, which runs animations directly on the native part, making our application animations available at 60 FPS. Right now, we are building some really amazing animations with React Native, and we see no performance drains. So if you are worrying about performance is no longer an issue. Great. Any other questions available?
If you assume you are having a Django application, now if you want to convert that web app to all the 3 platforms, so if we can implement this React Native into that application, it will be transferred into all the platforms, right?
Django is basically web app, I assume, where you have written HTML and CSS. So it will be like you have to target on React Native web. You have to start refactoring screen by screen into an Expo project and make it run on Expo web, and it will automatically run on Android and iOS. But it's like you have to create a new project and start implementing the screens one after another.
So if there is a ready-made Django project, we can't do all this stuff.
Yeah, Django is not a platform, it's a framework that makes it easy to run on some platform. So you cannot directly implement a framework inside Expo, but you can take that code out and start building your own version of the app. It will be a rework for once, but once it's done, it will be an application that runs across all the platforms. Cool. Any other question, guys? And you can also follow me on social media. I'm really active, and I'll be posting all my upcoming sessions online. And also, I'm writing some interesting blogs on Expo. You can also learn about that. Quick, give me a follow. And I recently started a new site called dannyakash.com where you can go and see my blog posts. And also the resources that we used, right? They are available on GitHub and Snack. So if you saw the events Facebook page or you are in the events mailing list, I'll send a mail which contains all the resources. Cool? Great. Have a happy weekend, guys. So really thanks for coming in, and also really big thanks to GUVI for giving us the space and providing a platform for everyone to learn. Cool? Clear. Okay.